Hello, everybody. My name is Jeannie Walters. It's another Friday, which means it's an Ask Me Anything webinar with experienced investigators. Now, today we're going to be talking about planning for 2022, some of the things to remember as you move through and plan both your customer experience goals and maybe your overall goals too. So, as always, today we have with us David Hornreich, our Director of Marketing. Hello, David.
Hello, hello.
And we always love to hear where you're joining us from. So drop that in the comments. I'm in a very rainy, cold, foggy Chicago, Illinois. David, how's Seattle today?
I'm in a rainy, cold Seattle. The creek near our house is not flooding, but there's not much room to go. So
Oh,
we're monitoring that with excitement.
with excitement. That's really a positive spin on
Yeah.
potential flooding.
Yeah, excitement can be positive or negative, or somewhere in between.
Well, I hope it stays at bay because
Yeah,
that's no fun.
yeah.
And well, today
Thais
we're,
is here.
oh,
Hi.
good. We've got some folks joining us.
Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Well, as we go through, as always, if you have comments, if you have questions, drop those in the chat. Today is kind of special because it's our last live webinar of 2021. So we're taking a break through November and December. We've got the holidays in there. We've got lots of planning like all of you. And so we hope that you'll continue to watch our videos, check in on our articles. We won't be stopping completely. We're just going to put a pause on these live sessions. So if you have questions, today's the day. Bring them to us. Yes. And if you've missed anything else, there you go. David just put up the link about where to find all of our webinars, all of our videos. You can check those out and let us know what other topics you want to see. What should we write about? What should we share with you? What tools do you need? Let us know that as well.
Yeah,
So
we've got, I think, over 80 videos now on YouTube and a lot of these old sessions. And by all means, if you've got questions on one of those, drop it in the comments. We see them all and we'll still be able to respond and communicate with you that way.
definitely, definitely. And I have to say that one of my favorite parts is that some of the questions are not always related to the topic, but we answer a lot of questions that way. So feel free to flip through and listen to the different questions from different viewers because we've covered a lot of ground in these. So if you're looking for a specific topic, you might be able to find an answer there. All right, should we jump in and get started?
Let's do it.
All right. Well, today we are talking about 2022 planning with 3 customer experience strategies. We've talked about planning before, we've talked about looking to the future before. Today, we're going to narrow in a little bit because this really came from hearing from different leaders and what they were saying to me. They were saying, you know what, I have a pretty clear vision for customer experience overall, but I'm not sure necessarily my role, or I'm not sure exactly how I can articulate this. So that's what this is about. So, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jeannie Walters. I'm founder and CEO of Experience Investigators. At Experience Investigators, we work with enlightened leaders just like you who care about customer experience and want to create meaningful experiences that drive business results. The mission of our company is to create fewer ruined days for customers. And by being here and sharing with us, you are helping us live that mission. So thank you for that. You can reach out in all these different ways. If you haven't already signed up for Year of CX, time's a ticking here. We are at the end of 2021. So sign up at yearofcx.com. Find other resources at experienceinvestigators.com and feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn or Twitter, all the various ways you can find us. So today we're talking about the planning process. And what do I mean by that? Well, a lot of the planning that I see that leaders are struggling with is we have to meet both the parameters of our organization. We have to kind of go with their planning process, their planning timeline. But then we also want to think about what are we really trying to move forward for customer experience management. A lot of times customer experience has these kind of vague goals. We've talked about that, how it's not enough to say our goal is to create a great customer experience. We have to get specific. And that's why we have those tools like the mission statement, like the success statement that we've shared before, that really help you define those types of goals. But then when we think about what we're trying to do as leaders, we have to bridge all of these gaps. We have to build coalitions throughout our organization, because CX is a team sport, we have to really figure out, what does it look like for me as a CX leader to succeed? And how can we really make sure that we feel good about this success moving forward as well? So, these are three ideas to apply right now as you look to 2022 and beyond. The first is defining your success metrics, and we'll talk a little bit about that. I really appreciate the power of gratitude, both giving and receiving, because it can do amazing things for both your teams and yourself. So, we'll talk about saying thank you. And then this last one feels kind of like, "Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about, think big," but let's dig into what that could mean for CX success. Because when we talk about thinking big, we're talking about big transformations, and sometimes that can be a little scary and daunting, but I'm going to encourage you to go beyond what you usually do and think about, what are some of those big transformational changes that would make the most impact for your customers and your organization. So, the first thing to think about is defining your success metrics. Now, throughout these webinars and throughout our content, we talk a lot about how important it is to define what customer experience success looks like at your organization. This is a little different. This is a little more introspective. This is about, what are your personal success metrics? How do you know if you're achieving those goals? And one of the things that I see again and again is that we do have to build those relationships. We have leaders throughout our organization who are probably still saying things like, "Well, I don't know about this CX thing," or they're just kind of ignoring it. They're saying, "Yeah, yeah, that sounds nice. Keep letting me know what those surveys say," but they don't really understand their role in it, and they're not really connecting with their teams to make the changes that we need them to make. And so maybe one of your success metrics is around that, building these coalitions and tracking who's really on board, who's helping you, and who still needs some more education, who needs more commitment. That can really help move the ball forward. That could be something that you track as a success metric. One of the very creative leaders I worked with created her own NPS system around, who did she have in her corner around CX versus the ones who she needed to bring up to become promoters. It was her way of really making sure that she assessed often, okay, we know marketing is with us. I don't know, procurement doesn't seem to be, or invoicing doesn't seem to be. We need to work on those. So it helped her prioritize as well. So define what success looks like for you as a leader, as well as what does it look like for your team. Tracking how CX is communicated is another good way to think about this. If we don't have our leaders, the C suite, really talking about and committing to customer experience in real ways, it is very hard to change things. And so maybe one of your goals and your success metrics could be, how often do we hear in those town halls, in those regular leadership addresses that your organization has, how often do we hear about customer experience? How often do we hear about it in the defined ways that we have defined success? All of those things. So think outside the box a little bit about your own personal success metrics, but this is just a way to really make sure that the efforts and the leadership that you are really committed to are reaping those results that you want as well. And then one other note here is that sometimes the best thing we can do is get more resources, get more funding, get more headcount. And so if you feel like, you know what, the best thing I could do is get two more people on my team, make that a success metric for yourself, and then build a strategy to get them. And that means showing the return on the investment, building a business case, all of those things that we have to do in order to communicate with other leaders and get their blessing to bring on more people for our team. So again, think creatively here. Now, the other thing that is super important, especially this time of year, is thanking people. And our customer facing teams, including our customer service reps, our cashiers, our delivery drivers, our customer success managers, all of those people who serve the customer directly, we need to find ways to thank them more often and in more meaningful ways. And what I mean by that is, there are lots of studies saying that, you know what, people want personalized thanks. Because if we can really acknowledge them, not necessarily with big awards or cash prizes, although of course those are nice, but what we want to do is connect emotionally and say, the work you did really impacted our customers and had a positive impact on our organization. And wow, I just really want to thank you for that. You really put in the effort and you really delivered. Doing that does a couple of different things. Number one, it respects the efforts of those customer serving teams because sometimes they can feel a little sidelined, a little ignored. We need to make sure that they are part of this conversation, that we are continually thanking them for all the things that they do for our customers. The other thing is it will help you stay connected to who are your superstars, who's doing really well, and what can we learn from them? How can we turn that into best practices? And then finally, gratitude actually, when you give it, there's a reward for you. By giving gratitude to other people, by showing how much you appreciate them, that's a dopamine hit for you. That means that you have a better experience by actually actively focusing on gratitude. So I encourage you, if you haven't already kind of created a gratitude practice, I really encourage you to do this. One of the things that I do every weekend is I review my past week and I look towards my next week. And in that process, I think about who do I need to show more gratitude to? What can I say? Or sometimes I just write about it and I say, I really have gratitude and appreciation for this. It's a way to stay connected to the people who are helping you deliver on these goals. And it's a great thing for you to do for your own emotional well being. So it's really a win win for everybody. And this is the one I really want to leave you with this today is thinking big. I just attended a couple of different events with different customer experience leaders. And one of the things that we hear over and over is that leaders get frustrated because they feel like sometimes this is all about those incremental changes. Customer experience is about baby steps. We have to make a change here and then a change here. We have to build a coalition. It takes a while. And so after a while, that can be a little frustrating. Because what we want to do is make sure that customer experience is such a positive driver of change in our organization that we are seeing transformation. We are getting that return on the investment in big ways, not just small ways. One of the things that I like to talk about is disruption because right now, today, there are people out there in the world who are trying to disrupt your industry. Right now, they're doing it. The barrier to disruption is lower than it's ever been. Somebody could come in and have a great algorithm and take out some pretty big industries. So we need to really think about if we had that magic wand, if we could change the customer experience in big, bold, transformative ways, what would that look like? Because once we start thinking that way, we start identifying, okay, this is doable. We could plan for this, we could make it happen. And now I know what incremental steps are even more important. How can we prioritize the things that will get us to that big vision sooner? When we don't think big, we get stuck in this cycle of measuring and improving and measuring and improving in very incremental ways. But if you're not your own disruptor, somebody else is out there thinking about these big transformative changes. So really get down to what are you trying to do for your customers? What is the goal? What is their goal? And how can you make that meaningful? How can you make that easier? How can you make that more convenient or more joyful? Look for those big things and then narrow down into maybe what's realistic or start making your pitch. Say, this is where we need to go. What do we need to do to get there? Think about what could be possible, not just what is possible today. The world is changing incredibly quickly. Technology and machine learning and all of these things are helping us evolve in faster and faster ways. And so maybe something you're thinking about, you think, well, that's not possible today. Don't dismiss it completely because it could be possible sooner than you think. So think big around what you can do for your customers. So, 3 ideas: define your success metrics. Really think about what it means to be a CX leader, what would work for you, what are the things you need to do in order to achieve those organizational goals and achieve what you've defined on that customer experience success statement. We also want to thank people. We want to make sure that we're showing gratitude, that we're practicing gratitude on a regular basis. The more you do this, the more it becomes a habit, the more people are appreciative of each other outside of just you as well. It becomes part of the culture. And then the last thing is let's think big about next year. Let's think about what could we do for customers? How could we deliver in more effortless, meaningful ways? How can we be more proactive on behalf of our customers? Really let yourself think about those things without the barriers of what is possible and think about what could be possible. So, this is about opportunities. One of the things that is both awesome and sometimes frustrating about planning is we think about, oh my gosh, we could do all of these things, but then we have to prioritize. None of us have all the resources in the world, all the time in the world, anything like that. So then we have to prioritize. But in this stage, when you're thinking about what to do for next year, let go of some of that. Really look at what could be possible, what what would happen if? What would happen if we could deliver? What would happen if we had a bigger team? What would happen if? And then that can help you kind of narrow down what those priorities should be, but at the same time, not getting stuck or limited with what could be just for today. So think about this as an opportunity to look to the future instead of a countdown timer in the next few weeks. So I'm very curious, what strategies are you looking to plan for in 2022? And, what are some of the obstacles that you're running into with planning as well? So at this point, I'd love to hear your questions. Drop those into chat and we will answer anything you got, including if it's outside of this specific part of CX.
Bring it on.
Bring it
Uh,
on. There you go.
let's start off with a comment from Sandeep. He just says, well said, thanking people is crucial, and having personalized messaging and appreciation makes people feel good about their contribution. So,
Mhm.
so huge. And
Absolutely.
of course, as we've talked about before, employee experience ties in so much with customer experience.
Mhm.
So it really is benefiting your customers even to be appreciative towards your team.
It's very, very true. And I think that's another great point is when we are thanking each other on a regular basis, that does kind of grow by osmosis. So if you're thanking those customer service people who are dealing with customers all the time, they're going to be more likely to share that gratitude with customers as well. So that's a win, win, win all over.
It's a lot of wins.
It's a lot of wins.
Let's jump to a question from Gabriella. Gabriella joining us from Madrid. She asks, any thought on customer health index versus net promoter score? More and
Mhm.
more companies are using CHI, and
Mhm.
Gabriella thinks that it might be more helpful in measuring since it's proactive. Do you have any thoughts on one versus the other?
Yeah, as I've said before, I am not a big believer that there's any one perfect magic metric. I think that there is a place for both of these things. And a lot of what happens is when we're looking at, what should we track? What metric is most important? One of the things that we have to consider is what data do we have access to? What metrics will be measured accurately? Because if we, for instance, use NPS, but we kind of do a survey here and a survey there, and it's different people and it's not structured, then that's not going to give us the valuable input that we need. And the same thing with customer health index. We really do have to look at how are we accessing this data? Are we able to access behavioral analytics? Are we able to look at operational metrics and customer experience feedback metrics and put that all together? Because I think when we talk about these metrics, they can be very appealing to just kind of flip the switch and say, this is what we're measuring now. But we really have to look at the big picture and think about what are we really trying to learn? Do we have the right information so that we can put these things together in a meaningful way? And then what will we actually do with it? So if we have an action plan, then that's the most important piece. There are places for many of these metrics. You've also heard me say like that sometimes it's better to track customer satisfaction versus NPS or customer effort score versus NPS. So there are different ways to look at all of these things. That's why I'm a big believer in understanding your feedback strategy as well as part of the customer journey, because sometimes we act like the feedback touch points are completely separate from the customer journey. That's not true. That is happening to the customer. So all of those things that we incorporate into these types of metrics, we need to just look at the big picture and understand the customer experience and understand what are we trying to do, and then understanding what is our action plan, because none of this matters if we don't act on the metrics, if we don't make sure that we have the access to the right data, that we are gathering it in the right way, that we are analyzing it in the right way, and that we are moving forward with action in the right way as well. So, no magic metric. I'm sorry.
But so many metrics that
I
are a
know.
little magical, depending
That's
on the
right.
context.
It's like a stew.
Yeah, exactly. We've got a question from Shashi
Oh,
joining us
Shashi.
on
Hello.
YouTube. Any recommendations for software
Mm,
on CX? Jeannie, I know that you tend to be pretty software agnostic. Um, I'll throw out one comment from somebody who's used a lot of software. Um, it's easy to have the tendency to find the software first and then try to
mhm,
mold your systems and processes to fit that software. And what I've found is it's best to start with the systems and kind of have an understanding of what you want to accomplish and how you want to accomplish it, and then find the software that
mhm.
best or most closely fits that rather than trying to work
Yes.
it the other way around. Other than that, Jeannie, any thoughts?
Yes, I totally agree, and David has certainly helped us here with that approach as well, but, the yeah, I think there's no there's no perfect software either. I mean, I think this really does come down to figuring out what's the best match for you and your organization. Some of them are incredibly robust. They have all the bells and whistles, but you might need a full team to actually operate that software and get it implemented in the right way. Others are pretty easy and straightforward, but maybe you won't get all of those robust data points that you would elsewhere. So I would think about your team as well. Think about who's available and how will they be using this. And then the other part of this is, again, like looking at how do you do this in a holistic way? Because one of the things I do see with software is, somebody comes into an organization from another organization and they say, oh, you know what we used back at my old job was this survey platform. I'm going to send out a survey to our customers because I know how to use this. And then somebody else over here is signing a contract with another software provider and they are about to send out a survey as well, and they're not communicating because it's not a centralized situation. So we really need to make sure that whatever we do with software and with these tools, especially the ones that interact directly with customers, we need to make sure that that's a centralized process and everybody's on board, because otherwise this is where survey fatigue comes in, and customers get frustrated because they answer a survey on a Tuesday, they get another one on a Thursday. It looks and feels different. They're asked some of the same questions. So they start saying, well, aren't you guys listening to me? And it becomes really convoluted. And so we need to centralize the strategy. We need to apply our feedback strategy on that overall customer journey. And then we need to look at what software is the best match, because there are so many choices now. And there's a feeding frenzy in the industry right now. So some of the smaller ones are now being acquired by the bigger ones. Some of them are more independent than others. You really have to do some research. What I always recommend is get a few demos and make sure that you really understand what it's capable of, but then talk to other, folks in your industry and talk to people who are using these platforms. The amazing part of the software that's available now is that we are connecting the dots in really powerful ways. But what that means is we have to make sure that if we use Salesforce, for instance, as the primary CRM, we need to make sure that if we find a software to really handle the customer data and customer feedback, we need to make sure those two talk together seamlessly, because that can also get decentralized and create a lot of data issues as well. So centralize and make sure everything's visible. Visibility is very, very important. And if you're talking to different providers and you're trying to explore, I just want to underline what David said. Come in there with some goals, come in there with your system, say, this is how we want it to work, because then they'll be more likely to show you if it's a match or not. Otherwise, they're going to show you all these amazing things and it's going to get really complicated. And you know what this is reminding me of is I'm going on some college visits with my son right now, and every college visit, like halfway through, you're like, "This place is amazing," and you think it's just you become enamored with it because that's their job, and then you have to take a step back and think, "Okay, what do we really need? What does he need?" All of these things. The same thing happens with these platforms because they are amazing, and all of them are really capable of some amazing results. So that's why I stay agnostic with it.
Yeah. Um, So, Funmi joining us on YouTube says tracking how CX is communicated is very important for me. It's essential everyone in the organization owns CX and it needs to come from the top. It's a great
Yeah.
comment and absolutely true. I want to tie in a question of my own with that. Jeannie, you talked about setting personal success metrics. Should those personal success metrics be communicated with others in the organization? And
Mhm.
should everybody have their own personal success metrics that are kind of tracked and that everyone's held accountable for, or how should that be communicated?
That's a great question, and the answer is yes and. Because, I think it really depends on the culture of your organization. Some places really want this type of sharing. They want people to share their personal goals. Other places, it might not feel safe to do that because if you have a culture where if you say it out loud, then they're going to expect it no matter what, or they are maybe have, um, punitive results or anything. Sometimes we have to protect those things for ourselves. So I would say it depends on where you are in your culture and your personality. There is conflicting research actually on goal setting. There was kind of a belief for a long time that if you shared your goals, you were more successful. That's actually getting challenged right now by some other research. So there are people, and this could be just one of the many things that is nuanced about individual people. There are some people who need to share goals because then that helps them become more accountable to themselves. There are other people. I'm actually one of these people who I can't. It's very important to me to have certain goals that only I hold on to because that's the way I operate, and I look at them every day, I strategize around them, but I don't necessarily share them in bigger ways. So I think you have to strike that balance and find what works for you. The reason this has come up lately for me in the leaders that I'm working with is that the CX goals can feel so big. They can feel so overwhelming and so, it can feel like you're boiling the ocean when you're working on some of these things. And so by narrowing it down and saying, okay, let's figure out what goals and success metrics work for you, that helps us get our arms around it and think, okay, I'm still making progress. Even if, the progress is, I just want one more person on my team so that eventually we can act on this feedback. Okay, well, that's great. Let's work on justifying that and making that business case and getting you that person on your team. That might not be something that you share far and wide, but that could be something that you start strategizing about and planting the seed for as you move through with your leadership team and things like that. So it's really something you have to think about as far as how much you want to share that. But I also want to get back to the comment about communicating because it's so important. And one of the best teams to build a coalition with is your internal communications team. They can really help you with that. They can really, if they're on board with this, they can really help you spread the word about customer experience and about the efforts and about recognition for people, all of those different things that are so important. So if you don't know your internal communications people, I would recommend you find them and start some conversations about this because they can really be a resource for you. Otherwise, it can feel like you're kind of shouting into the void. They will know where and when and how to communicate on a regular cadence so that it actually, makes a difference within the organization. So really partner with them if you haven't already.
Jeannie, you mentioned survey fatigue earlier, and
Mhm.
Vanessa has a question. She has certainly been experiencing that. She says, in B2B, I'm in B2B, and customers are exhausted with the impact of COVID, which has been a challenge in surveying. Customers have been over surveyed in this new normal,
Mhm.
working on getting a few baseline metrics along the journey, but we're in single digits with response rate. We've tried
Mm.
email and phone. Do you have any suggestions on how to approach this in 2022?
Yeah, first of all, I feel this from a lot of different organizations, and I don't know if you all remember, but, when GDPR rolled out in Europe, we all got that blast of emails saying, "This is what we're doing," and then during COVID, we all got this blast of emails saying, "This is what we're doing," and I think it was not just survey fatigue. I think it was over communication in a world that nobody really had control over. And I think customers felt that. They have reported saying like, "Yeah, I don't know what is happening differently or I just know that I'm not getting my product," right? Like I know that the supply chain is disrupted and I'm not getting my product. So I think we have to think about where do we really fit in our customers' lives? Because the survey fatigue often happens because we think that we are very important to our customers. Our brand is really, we're trying so hard. We're very important to them. They might be thinking, I don't know, I just want this product, or I just want this service, or I just went to the website once. And so I think this is where things like customer journey mapping and personas can be really powerful, because this can help us make better decisions about who and how and when we send those surveys. The other thing I like to do sometimes is just take a deep breath and pause and do something different. And what I mean by that is customer interviews are a great place to start. Finding people who are willing to actually sit down and talk to you and feel heard, that can go a long way, because then that can direct, okay, what do they really care about and how can we make these surveys more meaningful to them? The other thing that I like to do as well are virtual focus groups. I'm not a fan of physical focus groups, but virtual can be really powerful because you can control more of what they see and share. And so that's another great way to do it. A customer advisory board, bringing in people on a regular basis who are willing to share with you. Sometimes we over survey because that's all we do, or because that's all we know to do. But there are so many different ways to collect that voice of the customer to really act on it, that sometimes it's okay to take a break from those surveys and say, you know what, this isn't working. We're not getting the response rate we need. Let's try something else, and then build a direction and a strategy for our survey. So that's one thing I would consider. And when it comes, if you are being asked to send out these surveys no matter what, then what I would do is play around with A/B testing on subject lines specifically. And how are you serving up the surveys? So is it only email? Are there ways that you can collect it within the moment, like in-app experiences that they can give you feedback right there? Are you doing those transactional um, surveys in the moment right after the transaction, and in a way that is really easy and effortless? So I would look at all of those things if you were considering what to do next. But sometimes I know not everybody agrees with me, but sometimes I think it's okay to say, you know what, time out on surveys. We're not going to do surveys for 6 months. We're going to figure out some other ways to listen to the customer, and then we will revamp in a better way. Surveys became so easy to do that everybody started doing them. Customers get frustrated because, yes, they give you feedback and then they don't hear anything back. So maybe during that 6-month pause, maybe it's all about closing the loop. Maybe it's about going back and saying, who do we need to follow up with? Who still hasn't heard from us? How can we address all these issues? If we're not using the data, if we're not listening to the customer and acting on it, then it's a waste of time for everybody. And so doing a survey for survey's sake is not really good for anybody. So I would really assess, where are you in this? What do you really want to do? And are there better ways that maybe you can revamp a little as you move forward? But it is a real problem. We're not getting through like we used to, because, and some of this is email has gotten a lot smarter too. So all these smart inboxes, they hide our communications from our customers. And so it takes a little more effort and a little more creativity.
We've got two questions from Denise, and I'm going to squeeze them into one. The first goes, also, I just want to shout out, Denise is taking one of your LinkedIn Learning courses right now,
Oh,
Jeannie.
nice.
And this just came up as a notification. And so he's joining us here live for the first time. We're really happy to
Fantastic.
have you here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Antonese asks, first he says, I agree CX needs to come from the top, but are we seeing an increase in governments from the management structures and organizations?
Hmm.
And then
Hmm.
also, as we move forward, do you think that CX strategy and the customer journey are going to change again or more as we get
Hmm.
into more of a post-COVID timeline? Or how are things shifting as we
Hmm.
look forward?
Oh, such good questions. Okay, so I want to talk about this one, but I've already forgotten the first one. The first one was
Okay, we'll start with this one, and then we can go
all
back to
right.
the other one.
All right, because they're both really good and deep. So as far as will things change, I think they're changing, and I think that's going to continue. I think there are certain things that will not go away. The supply chain disruptions that we saw, part of what's happening is that we have more visibility into that, and that we are not as necessarily connected to that in some organizations as we should be. I believe that's going to get much better as far as management. We're going to have digital supply chain management and visibility into it in bigger, better ways. But we're still going to run out of certain things. We're going to run out of the actual containers. We're going to run out of the truck drivers. There are certain things that just have a finite amount right now, and some of that won't necessarily change. So I think we have to be ready for those hiccups. Not necessarily all the time, but I think we will have to, as CX leaders, really look to how can we set expectations around this? How can we have visibility into it so that we can prepare our customers more and in advance than what's happening now? So there are certain things that won't change. Another thing I don't think is going to change is that customers in general are asking for a lot more visibility into their health and safety with your brand. Meaning, if I go to a hotel, I want to know what they're doing. It's not just about the signs of how they're cleaning, but they're starting to show more. They put little things around the remote that tell you it's been sanitized, things like that. I think we're going to see more of that as well, and customers will continue to demand that as well. So, knowing some of those behavioral changes and knowing some of those marketplace changes, we can then create better journey maps. We can create better situations to look forward and innovate around customer experience. So that's just going to keep going. We're just going to have to keep changing and rolling with it and evolving as we go, which is why I like to talk about journey mapping as a verb and not a noun, because that's a skill. It's a process that you can use to help you in those moments where you're like, oh my gosh, it's changing again. That can be something that can be very helpful moving forward. And what was the other question? Uh-oh. David, are you frozen? Oh, he's back, but now you're muted.
Froze for a second, but just keeping you on your toes. Um, and so let's find the
Oh,
other
I see
question.
it. CX
Oh, you do?
governance management. Okay,
Yes,
got it.
yes, yes.
So thank you. So yes, CX has to come from the top, meaning that, I define CX as three things. It's a mindset, it's a strategy, and it's a business discipline. And that has to come from the top. They have to really believe in this and understand that there is a return on this investment and it's worth really looking at beyond inside the organization. So yes, it has to come from the top. However, the people who execute on this are usually in that management structure, right? We're talking VPs, customers or contact center leaders, different people in different parts of the organization. That's where having something like a CX charter, a CX team, something very cross functional can really help move the actual action through the organization. Because, yes, CX as a mindset and a strategy has to come from the top. But in order to deliver on it, and make sure it's part of your business discipline, you need people who are super plugged in to the rigor of it and the governance of it, and how do we make these decisions? How do we prioritize? That all comes down to governance around this. And so that's why looking at, do you have a CX team? Do you have a CX team charter? What are they really asked to do? And how can you move them forward? That can be a really good tool for that as well. So it has to come both from the top down and the bottom up a little bit.
Awesome. I'm unmuted and unfrozen and back in action.
You're going to let it go? You need to
Yeah.
throw. Sorry.
Was that a Frozen joke?
That
Was
was a
that
Frozen joke.
all right? All right. Are Frozen jokes dated yet? I don't know.
Probably. Yeah, but I'm dated, so there you go.
Okay, there you go. Let's get to it. We've got another question from Gabriella. She wants to know, how often do you believe that a strategy should be set? Every
Mhm.
6 months, every year, more frequently, less frequently?
Yeah, this is another one that kind of depends on the culture of your organization, but we've talked about customer experience success statements here, and that's really setting the goals, the time bound goals. So those can be something that you use once a year. You can also do something where you say, okay, this is where we want to be in a year. This is where we want to be in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. And then just revisit that and make sure you're kind of revising and updating as you go. But the strategy, the success definition that can change and be time bound because maybe you achieve something, right? You get that team of your dreams and everybody's working really well and now you're setting that next big goal. So those can change. Your mission should not change, your customer experience mission. And that's why I always recommend we start with a customer experience mission statement, because this is something that will be there for the long haul. This is something that is about how you show up for your customers and how you really make sure that they are um, uh, getting the brand promise that you delivered. And so the mission statement is the first piece, and then the success statement is the second. And the mission should drive that success statement. So every year, every 6 months, however you want to do it, you want to make sure that you're looking back on that mission statement and defining goals and success metrics around how are we living up to this mission? What can we do to live up to this mission? And make sure that you're connecting those dots whenever you revisit your strategy.
We've got a question from Sandeep who says, how can we get meaningful information from unstructured data like customer comments?
Mhm.
If a brand doesn't have access to text mining tools, then what's the best approach to actually quantify this data?
Mhm.
Are there any standard set themes or topics available industry wide?
Yeah, this is a great question. And you're right. Text mining can be incredibly powerful for this. That unstructured feedback that customers leave when they're asked why or why not, or when they just have a comment box to fill. There are other ways. There's no, you know, there is something sentiment analysis. A lot of the tools have that. That's kind of a level up from text mining. That can be helpful. The other thing that I recommend is just, kind of keeping your finger on the pulse of that stuff and looking for the themes yourself. So if you are looking at social media responses, if you are looking at user reviews, if you are looking at these comments, a lot of times it does not take that many to start finding themes. So if you review 20 of them and 10 of them mention that they waited for a long time, that's telling you something. It might not be scientific, it might not scratch that itch for your data analytics people, but it will still be a place to start where you can say, this is happening to people because they're telling us it's happening in this way. And then you can start assessing and moving back and looking at root cause analysis and really figuring out what's going on. But the overall approach here is that sometimes we have all this great quantitative objective, metrics, and we kind of ignore those comments if we don't have the tools, but we can't ignore them. People are talking to us. They're really trying to tell us something. So if we have the capability to go through as many as we can, if we have the capability to use some of those tools, I mean, you can do really low tech stuff, like put a bunch of them into a word cloud and see which word pops up as really important. Last time I did this, the last two times I did this, frustrated came up. That's a really good indicator that something's going on, right? And then you want to dig in even further. So there are different kind of low tech ways to do that. Text mining can be very, very powerful. AI is a really powerful tool for this as well, because that can really dig in and look for phrases and not just words about how people are communicating and what they're really trying to say. So uh, the the low tech, the low scientific method, it's not perfect, but it's still valuable to go through those exercises because it will show you something, and that's better than not looking at all. So that's where I would start.
Earlier, Jeannie, you talked about closing the loop with customers when they give feedback as kind of a
Mhm.
way to encourage that. We've got a question from Edir that focuses on what do you do when you can't implement or take action on
Mm,
the feedback that you've received just because of your own resources and priorities? How do you close the loop without being able to say, we've
mhm.
taken action on this?
Yep. Yeah, believe it or not, customers still wanna know that. So they wanna feel heard. So I would say there are situations where you can say, "Wow, that's a great suggestion. That's not part of our product roadmap at this time, but we heard you, and we have it in our list of future possible developments." This happens all the time. Customers understand that. The best part about that is if you can arrange it so that when that thing comes out, when that suggestion comes to light, you can go back to them and say, "Hey, remember that suggestion you made for us? Guess what? It's going to be rolling out or we want you to be part of the beta, or it's launching next week. We thought you would want to know because this was something that was important to you. That's one way to close the loop. I see again and again, not just at that survey level, but even with like customer success managers, account executives, folks like that, they don't call people back because they feel like they don't have the right thing to say. Customers just want to feel heard and responded to. And so if you have somebody very authentically saying, wow, we heard that, we can't address it right this minute. Here's why, or here's what we're doing, then that's okay. Um, you think about all the suggestions that technology companies get and all the different ways that people want to interact with them. Honestly, I think they often don't think people are listening at all to those suggestions, and that's more frustrating. So hearing back from somebody saying, "Wow, that's we heard you," that's enough to keep a customer emotionally connected because that's what we want. We want to feel heard. So sometimes closing the loop is about kind of breaking the bad news and saying, "Wow, we understand this is an issue. We're working on it. We will let you know." And then following up and being proactive about circling back with them and saying, "You know what? You were right and we fixed it and it took us a while, but we're back to let you know that it's fixed, or we're back to let you know that we implemented your suggestion." That can go a long, long way towards loyalty.
And Jeannie, of course, earlier we talked about saying thank you and appreciating your team and showing gratitude. And so, on that note, this isn't a question, but Thais says, I don't have a question, but would like to express my gratitude for all the learning and support you've given us through this project. And I can't wait for next year. Thank you,
Aw,
David and Jeannie. Uh, what a lovely
thank
note. Thank
you.
you, Thais. And I feel like this is a perfect time to throw it back to you and everybody who's joined us, whether this is your first time joining us or whether you've been part of the community for a while. You are the reason that we show up and do this every week, and
It's
you
true.
make it what it is. And so we're really grateful to you as well.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that comment. Thank you for everything. This community has really shown up with a lot of honest curiosity. I think people are supportive of one another, which is amazing. And we all know that this is hard work, right? This takes some effort. And the fact that every week we see you here asking these great questions, giving us that type of feedback, that means so, so much to us. So thank you so much. And yeah, this is not goodbye. We're just hitting the pause for a minute. And we are going to continue to deliver for you as far as content, as far as articles, tools, different videos. So if you have not subscribed yet, please go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And we are here for you, and the fact that you're here for us every week, I totally agree with what David just said. With We thank you for that. That's been very, very meaningful to us as well. So if you missed a past webinar, there's the link. You can go check all of those out. If you have ideas or suggestions, there you go. If you have ideas or suggestions for us, please get in touch. You can find us in all these various ways. And, like David said too, we do look at all the comments. So feel free to drop a comment on a past video as well. But really, thank you for all that you do as you plan for 2022, as you look for ways to create meaningful customer experiences. That means so much to us. The mission of my company, as you know, is to create fewer ruined days for customers. And by being here, by learning with us, by sharing with one another, you're helping us live that mission. So thank you so much. We will see you again very soon, and enjoy the holidays. We'll see you next year. Thanks, everybody.